afternoon, good evening, and welcome. This is FYMMO, and we're here today with Grace Latham and Margie Warrell. And what we're looking to do today is to explore bravery and breaking the barriers of your unlimited potential. I'm going to turn you over to Grace to start with. Sorry, my name is Rebecca Roper, and I am the coordinator of the FYMMO project at IADT. And Grace is here.
Thanks, Rebecca. So we're here today with Margie Warrell. She's a coach, author, and mother of four, an international thought leader in human potential who is passionate about inspiring people to live and lead more boldly. She is the founding CEO of Global Courage, a women's leadership organisation striving to close the gender gap in business and leadership. An in-demand speaker, and she offers credible insights in balancing work and family. Author of best-selling books Find Your Courage, Stop Playing Safe and Brave, and she motivates the audience to live and lead more. And her most recent book, You've Got This, is a masterclass to build trust, beat self-doubt, and make your boldest aspirations a reality. She's going to be talking to us today about bravery. Thanks very much for coming on, Margie.
My pleasure. Thank you, Grace, and thank you, Rebecca. It's a pleasure to be here with you all. Thank you for tuning in, and my intention is that over the next hour that you will hear some insights and have some encouragement to help you be braver. And the reason we're talking about bravery and courage today, and I use those two words synonymously, even though they have different sort of linguistic backgrounds, but I use those two words synonymously because I believe very, very strongly that at the heart of any worthwhile endeavour, and frankly at the heart of any worthwhile life, lays courage. We have to be brave with our lives. And yet that's easier said than done. If only it was so easy to be brave, there would be a lot more people living far more rewarding lives. There'd be fewer people sticking around in jobs that they hate for years, or in relationships they hate, or going to their graves, frankly, with the song still in them, to quote Thoreau. And so courage, this attribute of courage, is, to me, it is the foundation stone for living a great life. In fact, there's, from Aristotle to Winston Churchill, many have said courage is the first of all virtues because it's the only one that guarantees all others. So you might tell from my accent, I actually grew up in Australia. I currently live in Singapore, but in less than 2 weeks, I'm going to be moving to the United States very soon. And I, in my childhood, growing up on a dairy farm, one of 7 kids, very Catholic family. I'm older brother, Francis Patrick. I'm Margaret Mary. We well and truly didn't go very far. My horizons extended not much further than the back paddock. My dad milked cows for 50 years. And growing up, I honestly didn't know much of what was out there in the world. I knew there was a whole world, but I wasn't in it. We didn't have a TV for a few years. And we weren't a well-traveled family. And then at 18, I wanted to go to university. No one in my family had gone to university. And I decided I wanted to go to university. And so I left home, moved to the big city of Melbourne, which was about a 4-hour drive away, and had to sort of figure it out by myself. Like, how do you navigate a city? It was just like traffic lights, there's so many things that were foreign. And I was well and truly outside my comfort zone, and it was pretty overwhelming at times. I was sort of this unsophisticated rural country kid trying to make it in the big smoke. And it was challenging, but I stuck with it. I studied, I did my work, and I ended up 3 years later with a business degree. And then I got a backpack for not very much money, a cheap backpack, and worked in a couple of jobs in a pub and sorting frozen corn in a factory during the day. And I earned enough money and got some traveler's checks and set off with a round the world ticket around the world when I was 21. And that was a bit uncomfortable too. And I remember numerous times, it's actually when I traveled around Ireland, and for about 10 days backpacking around Ireland with a girlfriend that I met up with in England. But numerous times on that year away, I felt well and truly outside my comfort zone. But by the time I got back to Australia, I realized, I can do more than I think. It seems this big scary world, but the more we do things that scare us, actually the more we build our confidence and our capacity and our skills, like our competence and our courage for bigger things. So courage, this concept of courage, yeah, we all have different personalities, but the fact of the matter is courage isn't something that some people are just born with and others aren't, even if you might be a more timid, cautious person. Courage is a skill, and like all skills, like learning to write, like learning to learn a second language, like learning whatever you've been learning in your studies for the last 2 years, you can build it, develop it, and get stronger and master it. That doesn't mean that I don't get scared sometimes. It doesn't mean that I don't feel afraid. It doesn't mean I don't have a little voice in the back of my head that sometimes says, who the hell are you to do that? What will people say? What if you fail? It doesn't mean I don't have all of that. I've just got better at identifying that voice as the voice of fear and not letting it call the shots. So I'm going to share with you a very simple framework now that I encourage you, I invite you, I want you to think about some of the challenges that you might be dealing with, but I also want you to take some time and think about, what do you want to do with your one and only precious life as you kind of come out the gates and go, all right, what am I going to do? Because I actually graduated from university 30 years ago, and you know, I look back and it's been quite the adventure since then. It hasn't been a straight linear path. Many times my plans have derailed. Many times doors I'd hoped would open didn't open, or they got closed. But it's all about, so much of it comes down to your attitude, your willingness to embrace discomfort and to be brave, to do things even though you feel afraid. So let me get my slides up now, and we will go, oops, hang on. Sorry, let me start here from start. Okay, hopefully you're seeing those all right. Oops, hang on, we've jumped ahead. So, title slide. How can you break those barriers? Well, as you'll see here, this is the model I wanted to share with you, and it's so simple. And actually, if you've got a piece of paper in front of you, I encourage you, just draw a Venn diagram right now. Just stick 3 circles in it, because actually, I think we learn things better when we write them down. So don't just rely on looking at this. Just draw a Venn diagram on a piece of paper in front of you. Any old scrap will do. And in the first one, just at the top one, just put in the word, what's your focus? Here's the deal. What you focus on expands. And often we focus on what we don't want, and we think about all the worst case scenarios. What if this happens? What if that happens? We focus on what we can't do. Oh, I don't have any money. Oh, I'm not very good at this. Oh, you know, this border's closed, or it's a pandemic right now, whatever. We tend to focus on the negative. And it's so important to take some time every now and again to go, what is it that you really want to do? What is it that you can do? What's the biggest, boldest vision you have for your life? Because vision equals power. And when you have a vision of something you really want to do, it helps to act like a compass. It guides your actions. I was just sharing with Rebecca and Grace before we jumped online that I'm just finishing up my PhD. And I moved to Singapore just over 3 years ago, and I wasn't ever intending to do a PhD, but I found myself with extra time here. And I thought, you know what can I do with that extra time that would be a good use of that time, besides, you know, sitting on Facebook or, you know, becoming a yoga instructor or something. And I decided I'm going to do a PhD. And it's been hard. It's been a lot of work. But over the course of 3 years, I've managed to plow through that by just setting that vision and going, you know, wouldn't that be cool to get a doctorate? Here I am. I'm actually in my early 50s now, and I'm graduating with a PhD. But I share that with you, not because I'm some big academic or anything like that, but because I thought, wouldn't that be a great thing to do? So I invite you right now, I want you just to think ahead 3 years from now. 3 years from now, how old will you be? So 3 years from now, however old you'll be, I want you to think back and go, what would I love to do or to experience or to learn in the next few years? Now, I get that you might be just finishing study, but what's something that inspires you? And you know, we often overestimate what we can do in a day, but we underestimate what we can do in a year or 5 years or 10 years or in our lives. So get some clarity. What's something that excites you? The second point is around our story. I'm going to get to that in a minute too. I'm going to go through these one by one, and then our actions. So when it comes to your focus, I was just sharing with you how I did a PhD. Well, a few years back, I actually have 4 children. And even having 4 children, I actually had 3 kids, and I come from a big family, and I like the idea of a big family. But I moved to the United States when I had a 3-year-old, a 2-year-old, an 8-week-old baby, and I was kind of overwhelmed, as you might imagine. And I went away, and I got to go away for a day, and I did this vision exercise and thought, what would really inspire me 10 years from now? And what came up for me was to have a 4th child. And I was like, oh my God, that's so much work. But I'd already connected with actually what really excited and inspired me back then was to have another child. Now, I get that's not everybody's thing. And the point is, what inspires me doesn't matter if it inspires you or not. What matters is what inspires you. Well, one of my children, Ben, he decided a few years back, wouldn't it be cool as a family if we climbed Mount Kilimanjaro? And so we set off. I think that image might be reversed out accidentally, but we set off to Africa and we climbed Mount Kilimanjaro. And I got to tell you, it was really hard. We lived at sea level at the time in Australia. We weren't overly fit. It's about 6 kilometers in the sky, so it's pretty grueling. There's not a lot of oxygen up there. We were throwing up. We had headaches. But after 9 hours on summit day, we got to the top. And this photo was taken. It was the only time all day that we managed to smile because it was a grueling day. But I share that with you because so often we hold ourselves back way more than the world ever holds us back. And we don't even dare to do the things that we're capable of doing because we think, oh, I don't think I can do that. I don't think I could go traveling on my own. Well, that was a lot of friends when I was 21 said, oh, I couldn't do that. I'm like, well, actually you can. It's scary, but you can. You might want to. If you don't want to, then don't do it. But a lot of times we do want to do things, but we think, I don't think I can. And that's not the truth. It's just a story you buy into. For me, having 4 children and having a career, a lot of people are like, well, you can't have 4 kids and have a career. That's just a story we buy into too. And people are too scared to try. Climbing Mount Kilimanjaro was another case in point. So for you, think about what's something that excites you, even if it scares you, and dare to be bold. And then you've got to check your story. So the second part of that Venn diagram, just to jump back here, is you've got stories about who you are, about what you can do, about what you can't do, about how the world works, about what it's like to live where you live and come from your family. And we live in stories, all of us do. I've got them too. All of us do. Well, some of our stories expand what's possible for us, and some of our stories shrink down. If your stories don't make you feel, there's 3 P's, more positive about yourself and your future, more purposeful, or more powerful, like more empowered to do the things you want to do and change the things you don't want. If your stories aren't ticking those boxes, then they're actually holding you back and limiting what you see as possible and limiting the actions you take. In fact, research shows that when we focus on the negative and when we tell ourselves a story like, oh, I'm not very good at this and I could never do that and blah, 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 that little voice in your head, it actually shrinks our peripheral vision. We can't even see as widely around us. So just start tuning in. What's the story that you're living in? You got a whole lot of stories, but where are you living in a story that almost acts like a straitjacket? It keeps you from even trying to do the very things that you have the ability to do. I can assure you, I am not an intrepid mountain climbing type. I am not some super fit person, but I managed to get to the top of a really high mountain because I was like, you know, I'm going to give it a go and I'm going to put one foot in front of the other, even when I'm literally wanting to throw up and stop. I'm just going to keep going. But so often our stories hem us in. And our stories, jumping ahead now to this diagram, your story is made up of the beliefs you have. It's made up about the labels you put on your head and other people's heads. Maybe you've got a story, I'm not smart enough, or I'm not connected enough, or I'm not wealthy enough, or often we women, I'm not beautiful enough, I'm not attractive enough. And we come up with these stories that hold us back because our stories create emotions. So it might be if I think, oh, no, I'm not going to be able to cope because the next week I'm packing up house and moving country. People have said to me, oh, are you stressed? I'm like, no, I'm not stressed because I've moved country lots of times in my life. And I said, no, I'm not stressed, but maybe once upon a time I might have been stressed about moving country, but now I've done it enough times. I'm like, you just do it, right? But people get really stressed, like, oh my God, I'm so stressed. I've got all these exams, I've got all this stuff on. There is nothing out there that's making you stressed. What's making you stressed is the story that you're telling yourself about it. If you're feeling really flat and depressed, it's not because of the circumstances of our lives, it's because of the story we tell ourselves about the circumstances of our lives. That's not to say that sadness and fear and grief and anger don't have a place. But when we're constantly feeling those feelings, it's because we're telling ourselves a story that's perpetuating it. So if you have a lot of self-doubt, and I'm guessing you probably do have a few doubts, and I say that not because I've been spying on you, I say that because I've worked with, I mean, tens of thousands, maybe hundreds of thousands of people over the years, and everyone has moments where doubt comes up and they've got this little voice in their head going, who do you think you are to do that? I had that voice and I still have that voice. I've just got better at recognizing that as the voice of doubt. And so when you tell yourself a story that I'm not good enough and no one's going to, you know, I'll never be able to do this, or no one around here thinks I'm got that much talent or whatever, you feed that doubt. And so it can make you feel flatter. So challenge the story that you're telling yourself. Try on another story, see how it makes you feel. When I started writing my very first book, Find Your Courage, I went to a small school in rural Australia. There was a few years at my school, there was less than 10 kids. I was the only kid in my grade, the entire primary school. And there was one teacher for a whole school from kids 5 through to 12, 13. So, you know, we did not get I did not have the best literary education. I didn't learn about a lot of aspects of actually the English language. I kind of just wrote however I talked, right? And over the years, I got better at writing, but still I was never someone who saw myself as a J.K. Rowling, Shakespeare. That's just not how definitely wasn't me. But I felt really passionate about writing my first book because I ended up moving into coaching in the area I'm in now. And a little voice in my head was like, who do you think you are to try and be an author? I mean, you don't even know where the apostrophes go. And I just had to go, you know what? I'm not going to give that doubt the power to stop me trying. I'm going to give myself permission to write a not brilliant book. I'm just going to write the best book that I can. And so I sat down every day. I had young kids and I started writing my first book, Find Your Courage. And it took about 18 months. But eventually I churned out a book that came from the heart. Someone had to proof it to make sure I did have the apostrophes in the right place. I've got much better at that over the years. But eventually I wrote that book, and it's now in, I think, 7 or so languages. But I would never have written that book if I'd not given myself permission to not write, you know, Harry Potter. Not that I'm a fiction writer anyway, but I had to give myself permission to write the best book I can, and I had to defy my doubts, challenge my story and defy my doubts. And so for you, if you were going to defy your doubts, what would you do? Which brings me to...
Sorry, Margie, to interrupt.
Yes?
We seem to be having a problem with your slides. Could you press play from start again for us?
Okay. Is that working now or not?
No.
Okay. Why don't I, hang on, let me stop screen share. Right. And then why don't I start again? How's that? Is that working?
Yes, much better. Could you just
all
go
right.
back and forth just to make sure?
Okay.
Perfect. Thank you very much.
There we go. No worries. So this is the Venn diagram we're going with. This is my model for you. How do you really be brave and live your potential? So 1, what are you focusing on? 2, what's the story you're telling yourself? Is it making you feel more powerful, positive, and purposeful? And 3, what actions are you going to take? So set a bold vision, challenge your story and defy your doubts. And 3, embrace discomfort. So this picture here that you see, hopefully you can see it, is a picture of me actually and 2 of my younger siblings on my 10th birthday. And my dad bought me a horse. I think we sold a few pigs and he bought a horse. And it was a pretty old plotter. He was an old horse. And every day I would get out there and I would bridle him up and I would learn to ride him. And that's me in the far right there, I think on your screen, in my ABBA Gold t-shirt. And I was a big ABBA fan, still am. And I learned how to ride my horse. And in the beginning, I remember getting out there. I was really scared. I didn't know how to ride a damn horse. But I got out there every day. I'd bridle him up and I'd saddle him up. And, you know, every now and again, I'd fall off. But over time, I got better at riding. And then I started pleading with my dad, could we get a faster horse? Because he's really slow. And there wasn't a lot of money. There was drought at the time. And my dad went in a raffle. And there was 6 kids in my family at this stage. And it was 20 cents a ticket or 6 for $1. And sure enough, we won my second horse. And he went from 0 to 100 Ks an hour in like 2 seconds. He was crazy. I mean, you win a horse, it's probably not going to be the highest pedigree. But I learned every day I'd get out there and I learned to ride him too. And what I learned over the years, not that I could articulate this at the time as a teenager, but that growth and comfort can't ride the same horse. But the courage is a muscle. And the more often you do things that are brave, even though they're uncomfortable, even though they're scary, even though sometimes you might fall on your butt and it won't work out, the braver you get, the stronger you get. That trip around the world that I told you about as a 21-year-old, I came back to Australia and I was like, gee, now I really want to go and like travel around the Middle East and Africa. Well, I would never have had the courage to travel around the Middle East and Africa at the age of 22 had I not gone to America and around Europe and Ireland at 21. And so off I set again and traveled around the Middle East and Africa for about 5 or 6 months, came back, and then I started a proper job working in a big company and met my husband and got married and had kids and have lived around the world. But I share that with you because you've got to start somewhere. And so for you right now, with where you're at, I've got a question for you. What would you do if you were being brave? Like, what's something you would do if you were being really brave? Would you ask someone out on a date? Would you break up a relationship because it's just, and you know somewhere deep inside you're settling? Would you put yourself out there for a job, or would you follow up on a job even though you're risking getting rejected again? Every worthwhile thing I've done, from writing books to having 4 kids to traveling around the world to pretty much just everything, getting up on a stage to speak, starting a business with 4 kids in a new country, everything worthwhile, the most worthwhile things I've done in my life have required me to really sit with discomfort, to be vulnerable, to lay my pride and my ego on the line, to risk a rejection, to risk falling short, to risk failing. And then when I have, because I have at times, don't make a story that I'm a loser. You are not a failure. You might have failed at something, but you're not a failure. So be careful the story you're telling yourself, right? When your courage doesn't land the result you want, because I'm telling you, it won't always land the result you want. But to quote Shakespeare, fortune favors the brave. The fortune favors the bold, or whatever language you want to use on that one, but you know the quote. And so I challenge you to think of something today, in the next 24 hours, something that's brave, and to do it. I know it's going to be uncomfortable. Maybe you're going to get little butterflies in your belly. Do it anyway, and just see what happens. Don't make it, if it doesn't work out, just go, doesn't matter. I was brave anyway. And if it does work out, go, kudos me, because now I know that the world didn't open up and I didn't fall to my death. And even if it doesn't work out, you know that. And then tomorrow, ask yourself, what would I do today if I've been brave? And if you did that every day, if you asked yourself that question and then you took the action, getting back, let's just go all the way back, you took that brave action and were brave with your life. You reached out to someone, you risked a rejection, you had a tough conversation, you put yourself out there in some way. Over time, you would become a more confident person, a more courageous person. You would make relationships with with people that would help keep expanding your network. And I can't overstate how vital it is for you to expand your network beyond the current people that you mix with. And if you're the biggest thinking person you know, times that by 10, and just keep connecting with more and more people that just keep expanding what you see as possible. Because if I'd stuck with what I saw as possible as a young girl on that farm, I would never have done any of the things I've done. I would have just probably left school at 16 and, you know, stayed very local and not have, I've had so many experiences I've had, from interviewing Richard Branson to, I don't know, just climbing the Great Wall of China as a speaker and running programs in China, and to all the travels that I've done. And so for you, I know that you will be inspired by different things, but I encourage you to be brave and to embrace that discomfort, because courage is not the absence of fear or doubt or misgivings or that little voice in your head saying, who the hell do you think you are to do that? It's action in the presence of it. And so as you think about, well, what does that mean for me? I encourage you to just do one thing today, even if it's a tiny thing, and to take action. And as I wrote in my most recent book, because I've written 5 now, my most recent one is You've Got This, and I encourage you to check it out, and along with my podcast. But if you dared to act like you've totally got this, that you have everything it takes to do what you want to do right now, then I can tell you, 1 year from now, you'll have done so many things you would never have done otherwise. All right, take care, be brave. You are capable of more than you think.
That
Thanks so
was
much, Margie.
amazing. Absolutely amazing. I was looking at my life in a completely different way. I know I'm in a completely different place in my life than most of our listeners, but you know what? There are times in my life when I've been brave, and exactly as you said, that has made all the difference.
Yeah,
And those
it really
times,
does.
yeah. I mean, it's funny. You kind of get used to that voice, and you become acclimated to no, that's not for me kind of vibe. And there was a time when it wasn't like that, and it's really important that you keep reminding yourself, no matter where you are in your life, that
Yeah,
growth and comfort can't ride the same horse. If I can
yeah,
quote you, I
yeah.
think that is an amazing quote. That is amazing. I'm a changed woman already, so I'm sure. So yeah, no, that is fantastic. Fantastic. Thank you so much. I'm sorry about the slides, but I was wondering, is it possible for us to maybe get the ones at the beginning, maybe to share?
I'll just send you the slide deck,
Oh, brilliant. And we can,
and you can just take that slide deck and you can share it with us. Just share it. It's fine.
great.
It's absolutely, yeah.
That is fantastic. But I think we have a couple questions. Grace has been compiling.
Yeah, I have loads of questions. I
Yeah.
was listening to You've Got This as an audiobook while I was researching you, so it's I have lots of questions. Um, I'll be a bit more specific because your work can be so broad and go into so many different like life scenarios. But with students who are about to go into the workplace that are about to face possibly rejection after rejection from jobs that they think that they want, that they think is going to be the dream job that they're about to land, what would you suggest for facing that rejection?
Yeah. Don't make it mean something it doesn't mean.
Mm.
So right now we're in a particularly tough job market, I mean globally, and a lot of young people. I actually have children same age as you. I have a 22-year-old, I have a 21-year-old, I have a 19-year-old, a 17-year-old, and but my older son is graduating. My oldest child is graduating, and it is a difficult job market, and you can do the best you can, and that is to quote Mother Teresa, and that's what you can do, and that's going to just always be enough, even if it's not enough, right? Even if it doesn't land you the job, that's what you can do. So focus on what's inside your control and not outside your control. You cannot control whether you get a job that you go for. And when you said, Grace, you know, that you think you want, well, maybe you really do want it. And believe me, I've gone through things and I really wanted them and I haven't got them. But every experience has an opportunity for us to learn something. And often we tell us the reason rejection hurts so much is because we equate rejection with our own value and what we have to. Rejection just means someone had a bunch of people and they said, I'm giving a job to this person. Maybe it's their boss's, you know, nephew or next door neighbor. Who knows? I mean, you don't know why you didn't get the damn job. It doesn't mean you're not excellent. It doesn't mean you don't have tons of talent. It doesn't mean you don't have enormous potential. It doesn't mean the person who got it is any better than you. It just means they gave it to someone else. That's all they did. It's the only thing it means, they gave it to someone else. Don't make it mean anything more than that. But don't miss out on the learning it holds. If there's an opportunity to get any feedback, just say, I'd really value, I would be so grateful for any feedback I could get on why I missed out on this position. You may or may not have that opportunity, but if you do, take the feedback. Look, maybe we're looking for someone who was, you know, had this or had that, or is older or is younger, or, you know, I don't know, whatever. But just get the feedback, because that could help you. Maybe you didn't interview as well as you could have. Don't make that mean you're not great. You just, maybe you could still hone your interview skills. Maybe you need to practice more. Maybe you hadn't researched the company enough. I mean, I don't know. Don't make, my daughter actually missed out on an internship this morning and rang me and she said, Mom, I'm sort of sad. She's in New York. I missed out on this internship and I'm really bummed about it. And I said, honey, take the learning. What is there? See if you can find out anything about it. But there's a lot of people going for internships right now. It's like, it was even a virtual internship. It's not even that, it's like, it wasn't even, but this is just the state right now. So, okay, take the learning and just keep focusing on what you can do. And she's very creative. So I'm like, focus on be creative, do stuff that you love to do and build up your portfolio. And so that when you have an opportunity to get in front of people again, you've got even something to show for what you've been doing with your time. So I would just tell people, just don't over personalize a rejection. I know it can feel very personal, but actually it's not about you. But do take the learning. It also is about you. It's about how you respond to it. Use it to help put you in a better position next time.
That's great advice.
Thank
It's
you.
how you respond to it. It really isn't about you so many times.
No.
It has
And I
nothing
would
to
also
do with
just say, I actually would say risk more rejection. So actually in my book, Brave or Train the Brave, I have a chapter in there that's called Risk More Rejection. And for me, in my work, I have to risk rejection all the time. And I remember actually when, I think it was another book, Break Your Mark, came out, I just set myself a goal of I wanted to risk 50 rejections and for endorsements by big name people. And I was giving myself, success was that I risked 50 rejections, that I reached out to 50 people and said, would you endorse my book? And if I got 0, I had succeeded because I risked 50 rejections. And I think at about, you know, request number 40 something, I reached out to Bear Grylls. And lo and behold, overnight came back, you're happy to endorse your book. And he endorsed my book. And I was like, Struth, who would have thought? You know, like it was just such a, like, just throw it at, you never know. You just never know when you might land something. So there is a little bit of maths in this, that the more times you risk rejection, the better the odds that you're going to land something. So put yourself out there and put yourself out there and put yourself out there and put yourself out there. And just know sometimes that's what it takes. And follow up and follow up and follow up, and don't make it mean anything when people don't want to know you. Like they're like, just go, all right, I'm just doing my job. Because I've actually even employed people, and sometimes people have contacted me and I'm like, you know what? Good on them for freaking tenacity. I'm going to reward their tenacity. So sometimes just my daughter's actually landed some great opportunities that way too. She wants to work in media and entertainment in New York. And I'm like, Maddie, just be tenacious. People will notice if you're being tenacious over time. Not all the time, but sometimes.
Great advice.
I've a whole list of questions, so I'll just keep going. Can you talk more about leading as a woman with global courage?
Yeah, absolutely. So we women, I mean, we're women. I'm sure there's going to be a few guys that are watching this too, but let's face it, we live in a world that's got lots of different social and cultural norms, and it's got gender norms. You know, women's roles in society, and there have been over history far fewer women who are in leadership roles. You look at history books, you look at all the great writers of history. I mean, even some of the female writers had to use male pseudonyms because we were like, they couldn't get away with being a male writer. So women have fewer role models in terms of leadership, and women tend to doubt themselves more and back themselves less than guys. That's not to say that there's men who don't sometimes struggle with self-confidence. Not at all, I'm not saying that. But there are gender differences. There are real gender differences. Women also have a lot more expectations on them in terms of caregiver roles at home. That's changing, but it's still there. Women face more biases. You know, when women are assertive and confident or ambitious or competitive, they are judged more negatively than a guy acting exactly the same way. And yet when women do fit with the way women are supposed to act, which is very collaborative and consensus seeking and caretaking, they also get judged as less leader-like, less potential for leadership. So it's sort of a double bind, damned if you do, damned if you don't. But research shows that when more women sit at decision-making tables in every sphere, in politics, in business, in everywhere, in peacemaking negotiations, better decisions are made, better outcomes are achieved. In peacemaking, peace deals last longer. And yet so often women aren't at those tables. It's certainly not in the numbers that make a difference, and you need at least 30% to make a difference to the outcome. And so as a woman, I grew up in a pretty gendered home. The girls stayed in the kitchen and we baked the cakes, and I changed the nappies of my younger siblings, and my brothers went out and helped Dad down the dairy. And that's just how it was. I honestly didn't think any differently. It just was how it was. But as I've grown up and been in the world, I realized how much even my own vision for myself, I never considered that I could be a CEO, or it just didn't occur to me till my 30s. It's like, that's been filtered. My ambition was filtered by just my own upbringing. And all of us have that. Like if you were a guy with your, 20 women, like how would you see yourself differently with your talents? Because women often judge themselves more harshly. And, there was some great studies. There was a math test, a science test, and they said to these young 16 and 17-year-old boys and girls, how do you think you're going to go? And the guys generally said, I think I'm going to go pretty well. And the girls generally said, oh, I don't know if I'm going to go very well. And then they did the test and they said to them, how do you think you went? The guys said, oh, I nailed it, did pretty well. The girls generally said, oh, I don't think I did very well. And actually they got the same scores. And then afterwards, even when they said to the girl, you got 80%, they still said, I don't think I'm particularly good at science. And the guy said, I'm really good at science. So my point is, it's not about, we tend to judge ourselves more harshly. And so a lot of my work in the women's leadership space is really helping women own their unique differences and value. And also I work with a lot of male leaders too. How do we create inclusive cultures that really celebrate and harness the diversity of everyone, and not just gender diversity, racial diversity, personality diversity, generational diversity in all its forms.
Yeah, it's funny. I've been thinking a lot about, the leaders that we have in the world right now. I think it's very much on the global norm, and I think one of the things I'm thinking is, we discourage our children from bullying, and yet we see people in huge leadership positions, and sometimes democratically elected, who might be called bullies. So there is this who are bullies.
Might be elected out soon, pretty much too.
Yes.
So
yes, that is a happy day for me. But that's leaving that aside, there's sort of a disconnect between what we're trying to tell our children and what we're trying to have people model, and then they look and they say, but but these people are the successful ones. So it's coming up with a different model of how do we, and it's not just about, it's cross genders. How do we achieve greatness and leadership, as you're speaking about, in a way that is not pushing down someone else, or raising yourself above in a way that kind of negates other people. So how do we rise, in a way that's more inclusive?
Yeah, and look, I understand there is examples of leadership that is not inclusive and that is not, to me, something I would be aspiring to, or saying to my children, aspire to that. But there is also great examples of incredibly inclusive leadership, of good leadership too. And so I think one is, don't just focus on the negative leaders, as prominent as they are and as much as they dominate headlines.
Yeah.
They're dominating headlines because so many people are aghast at the leadership. So, but I would also say, we can't change how everyone else is, but we can change ourselves. Lead the change you want to see. Be the leader that you wished you had or that you would like to see more of. And to me, my take on leadership, and I write for Forbes and I write about leadership a lot.
Yeah.
And in the political realm, I write about leadership not through the lens of partisanship being left or right, but through the lens of character, through the lens of values, through the lens of principles and decency. And I absolutely believe we need a diversity of opinions. We don't want everyone to think the same way. Abraham Lincoln he always got his political opponents on his cabinet because he said, I know my best decisions will be made when I've got someone who is a smart, intelligent person who thinks very differently than me. I want people to interrogate and challenge my thinking. So, and if you really disagree with someone, just sit there and listen. I really want to understand why you think why you do. I've done that with friends in the United States who have very different political, actually not always different political opinions, but support different people. And I'm like, I really want to know why you support this person. I just really want to understand what makes you think that. And maybe they value policy over the person, and they like the policies, and they're willing to accept things about the personality that I wouldn't accept. Yeah. But I think for all of us, and to all the younger people watching this, you are the next 40 years from now, 20 years from now, you are the prime ministers, you are in the cabinets, you are the elected officials, you are the next lot of leaders. And so if that's something that calls to you, step up and start acting like the leader you want to be. Don't wait to be given permission. Don't wait for a title. Don't wait till you have any power. Just your power is in you. And I feel really strongly about encouraging young people to become very active participants in whatever spheres. Sometimes it's in your workplace, maybe it is in politics, maybe it's in education, but step up and act like a leader. And the more you act like that, the more people, you'll create a brand, people will relate to you as that. But don't wait to be given a title or someone to say, hey, you should be a leader. Start being a leader.
Yeah, I think that's great advice. And it really is a grassroots, isn't it? It's about creating a sense of empathy, looking around and saying, okay, this is who I want to be. And this is the best me. And this is, it's my, I can lead in so many small ways in my own life. And I think that's really, really important for everyone to kind of get attached to, and it's about bravery, exactly as you said at the,
and I think, Rebecca, not everyone's called to the political sphere. Not everyone wants to be a CEO. Like we're all different. I don't have a big team of people, and I just feel, even I know for me, it's like, well, what does leadership look like for me? For me, it's being willing sometimes to do a video and post it to LinkedIn or Facebook or something and go, God, I hope I feel vulnerable and exposed, but I feel really strong about this issue. Or maybe I just want to give it writing a book. Like that's me, that's my leadership. So, but everyone, you've all got talents, and what I want to say, I think particularly often we don't think we are anything special. And you know what? In one way, none of us are that special. But in another way, every one of us have something special to bring. And no one has your combination. No one has your combination of talent, of personality, of life experiences, of living where you live and knowing what you know, and opportunities to exert influence. So just run your best race of one. You know, don't focus on all the other people around you. Like, you run your best race. Don't try and be like anybody else. Try and just really be as good as you can be using your talents. And what everyone else is talented at, good, let them run their best race.
Yeah. Do you think that there's a difference now with in this generation because of social media and because of the echo chamber that can happen with that? And you know, how do we, you know, I think you talked about talking to people with whom you have differences. So, you know, maybe follow different people that you don't agree with, and
Absolutely. When You've Got This came out earlier this year, I ended up doing an interview, and it was with I didn't even know who they were, but I since discovered in America it's a very big conservative media outlet, and I didn't know who they were. I was just happy to do an interview to talk about my book, but I ended up on their newsletter list and their social media, and they have a very different perspective. One could argue different reality than the one that I would have ordinarily subscribed to. And I was going to unsubscribe, and I thought, no, I really want to know what everyone else who sees differently than me is, what they're being exposed to. I want to be seeing different perspectives. I mightn't agree, but I really want to see what other people are being fed all the time. So in terms of the political arena right now, I think it's really important to do that. But across the board, period, I think it's really important. Don't just hang out with people who see things exactly the way you see them. And if you're going forward in your career, and don't just hang out with people who think exactly the same way you do. Go and talk to other people who have different perspectives, who have different backgrounds. Maybe you're a creative. Maybe go and talk to people who have had much more analytical careers and are more left brain. Or if you're a real left brain analytical type, go and talk to some people who are real creative, and just get different perspectives, because otherwise people are going to keep telling you the same thing. And one thing I think is really important, and it's just a tip for anyone moving into the workforce, actively seek out constructive feedback. If everyone you know tells you you're awesome and everything you do is brilliant, that's lovely. But actually the most valuable feedback will be when someone says, you know, I wonder if you could do this differently, or I wonder if you should develop a bit more skill over here. That's far more valuable than people saying, oh, you're awesome. And so a lot of times people don't like to do that. So I would encourage you, think of 5 people whose opinions you respect, and just say, I would love just 10 minutes of your time, that they know you. And just say, I would love it if you would just give me like one thing that you think I could do more of, and one thing you think I could do less of. And like, you're giving them permission to tell you something. And they might, because if you just said, oh, is there anything I can do better? They might say, oh no, you're great. But if you say, what's one thing I could do more of? They might, you know what, I wonder if you could take a bit more time to listen to people. You talk a lot. Or I wonder if you should be a bit more proactive, whatever. But give people permission and make it easy for them to give you constructive feedback, because that's how you're going to get better.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's about being brave, isn't it?
That's being brave, because sometimes people, I did this last year. I got a guy to watch my feedback of a keynote speech I gave on a stage, and he gave me some tips about things that I wasn't doing as well as I could have. And it wasn't that I wasn't good. I was perfectly good, but could I be better? You bet I could be a lot better. But I wouldn't have got that feedback if I just hadn't gone out and actively said, I would really love some coaching, critical feedback on how I could do better.
I just want to go back on one little thing, because one of the things you were talking about is see people with differing points of view, and left brain, right brain. And that's one of the things about IDT, the institution, is that you have that mix, because we have filmmakers, we have business people, we have humanities people, we have psychologists, we have model makers, we have animators. So there are opportunities for those worlds to collide and intersect. And one of the things that happens with students naturally is that they do. So that's great. And that's one of the reasons we started FYMMO and FYM, which is the First Year Matters program, was to get those intersections and to encourage people to come and hear other stories. So yeah, I just wanted to kind of, I guess that's part of that, but it's about finding the positivity and the power in where you are right now, and that's an exciting thing. But I'm sure we have other questions. I don't mean to hog all your time. Is there more there, or maybe just one last one, perhaps?
One last
There's
one. I'll
one
pick my favorite.
Oh, you can do. Do you have time for two?
There's a lot. I'll probably send them to you after, Margie, if that's okay. So when I was listening to your audiobook, because you've got this is available through audiobook as well, which is fantastic. I was kind of jotting down my favorite lines, the ones that really jumped out to me as you were speaking. So I've got a few here, but the one that's really, really jumped out to me was, when all you do is conform, all you do is offer conformity, being true to yourself. I'd love if you could talk for 5 minutes on that.
Yeah. So in Australia, growing up, as we know, Britain sent all its convicts there many years ago, and Australia has a culture, it's very egalitarian culture, and there's this phenomena that's known as tall poppy syndrome. Tall poppy syndrome is where anyone who dares to rise up too high and be too different than everybody else, like a tall poppy flower growing up above the pack, runs the very real risk of being cut back down to earth. And so Australia is sort of famous for anyone who is particularly successful, entrepreneurs, for instance, of people just delighting in their downfall. And growing up in a rural area, it was a bigger insult to be called stuck up or up yourself than it was to be called, say, a bitch or mean or nasty. And because the idea that you thought you were too good was just like, oh, I don't anyone to think that I'm up myself or stuck up. I'm trying to be. And I share that with you because when I went off to even go to university, there was a lot of people in the rural area I went to who didn't go to university. And they're like, oh, you think you're a bit up yourself because you went to university. And it wasn't that common back then. It's a lot more common now, but it wasn't. And then over the years, even writing my first book, even in my family, when I said I'm thinking of writing a book, they're like, why are you going to write a book? And my fear of standing out, of being different, of aspiring to do something that was sort of above my rank was actually very real, and was something that it took a lot for me, a lot of courage to overcome. But I truly believe we cannot achieve outstanding success unless we are willing to stand out. And when all we do is dial ourselves down so that we fit in with everybody else and we don't stand out, we don't try to do anything too big or too different, then we dilute the difference we negate the difference that our difference makes. Like, we all have something unique to offer. And to your point, when all we do is conform and fit in, then all we offer is conformity. We're just like everybody else. If everything you do is just like everybody else, and it takes real guts, real courage to say, I'm not going to do what everyone else is doing. Maybe you want to go off on a different path professionally. Maybe you disagree with people around you. And, groupthink exists for a reason, because we are wired for belonging. We're wired to fit in, to have approval, and we're wired to avoid situations where we might be criticized or disapproved of or cast out of the pack. And so it takes courage sometimes to walk your own path and to decide to do something different from what your friends might be doing. And yet, unless you're willing to do that when you're called to do that, you're never going to know what you can do. And I know for me years ago, like even wanting to work and having children, all the women around me didn't work where I was living. I was living in Texas at the time. And it took, for me, you could see people were judging me, like, you've got children, you should be looking after your children, not trying to build a business. I just wasn't hanging out with women who were ambitious outside the home. So for me, that took a lot of courage to do that. Now I'm surrounded by women like that, but I didn't know any back then. I just didn't know any. But for you, I would just encourage you, never give away your power to what other people think. And if you didn't care what everybody thought, and if you weren't afraid of judgment or criticism, what would you do? And sometimes that just means taking your own path and standing out and being a non-conformist. Sometimes in a world that pressures us all to fit in, and we are all pressured to fit in, it takes enormous courage to be a non-conformist. Not for the sake of being a non-conformist, because that's not my point, but because that's what it means to quote Shakespeare again, to thine own self be true, because that's what's true for you.
Thank you so much. Margie, do you want to talk about how we can see your podcasts and your books and everything that you have available at the moment?
Sure thing. Well, on the last page of that slide, I'm not sure if I can get it up quickly or not. Let me just see if I can. There we go. And let's just go to there. I think you might be seeing that. Hopefully you are. But if you just go to margiewarrell.com, you can sign up for my newsletter, my podcast. You can find it on iTunes and Spotify, and also I'd love to connect on social media. So if you're on Instagram, wherever you are, I know young people, I am not on Snapchat. And LinkedIn, please connect with me or follow me. I'd really love to stay in touch that way, and hopefully continue to encourage you to be brave with your life. So thank you for asking, and yeah, we'd love to stay in touch with everybody.
Well, best of luck with your move. It's coming up soon, and I'm delighted that you'll be part of America, because we can claim you now. No, but no one claims you. End of story, right?
I'm a citizen of the world. That's what I say.
You absolutely are. You absolutely are. So thank you so much for your time, Margie and Grace, and also for Caroline, who is our IT expertise. She is behind the scenes there, working diligently to keep everything on the road. We have an upcoming event next week, which is another special. There we leave it.
I think you're muted, Rebecca.
I think I am too. So Grace, you'll take it for a minute here while I see if I can turn off the. There we go.
No worries, Rebecca.
Thank you.
So all of the questions you have sent in to us will be sent to Margie. We also have your contact details to send them back to you. As Margie mentioned, you can contact and find out more about her through her podcast and her website and her LinkedIn if you do want to hear any more from her or watch any of her videos. So next week we have Colin Murphy talking to us about career strategy, as well as an FYMMO collaboration with IGT Radio Soc for a Christmas competition. So that's coming up the week after next, and you can win one of 5 €20 vouchers towards thesis printing at the Thesis Centre. So listen to IGT Radio Soc when they go live to hear about how to enter that competition. I'd also like to say a huge thank you to Rebecca and Rachel, and of course Caroline, who's behind the scenes, and a big thanks to Margie as well for our talk this evening.